Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to turn to journalist, author, podcaster Matt Taibbi. His podcast is called Useful Idiots, not to be confused, of course, with the useless idiots who have once again destroyed our economy and financial system. Matt, welcome back.
How's it going, Max?
Fabulous. Matt Taibbi. Now, okay. Nobody captured the 2008 financial crash zeitgeist better than you with your talking about Goldman Sachs as a vampire squid. Have you come up with a similar metaphor for the 2020 pandemic collapse yet?
I have not. I have to go into the metaphor factory for this one. Honestly, this whole thing is, the size of it is so hard to get your head wrapped around that just conceptually, I just don't really have a firm grasp on what's happening here. I mean, clearly this is going to end up dwarfing 2008 in so many different directions, and including with the bailout package. So it's really hard to have a line on it yet.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's a continuation of 2008. It's part two of 2008 because, as you documented in your work at that time, the solution at that time was to simply give the guys who did the bad things more money to do more bad things. So here we are in 2020, and suddenly the outcome is much worse. Now, the U.S. spends 18% of their GDP on health care, and yet health care and health workers in the top hospitals in New York City are wearing garbage bags for medical gowns. What does that tell us?
Well, obviously, we have a healthcare system that's completely inefficient, and it's based on a series of incentives that don't really make sense in terms of if your aim is to provide good and efficient healthcare to everybody. That's really not what our healthcare system is designed to do. It's designed to drive profits to a few people in a few industries, pharmaceutical, insurance industries mainly, and hospitals as well. But one of the things we're finding out with this crisis is that there's just a mismatched set of incentives for just providing basic care. So, for instance, hospitals are going to get killed through this whole affair because just putting a sick person in a bed for 7 to 10 days and putting them on a ventilator is not a money-making activity for them. So even though they're going to be overwhelmed, they're going to be busier than ever, they're actually going to lose cash. They're going to forego elective surgeries. They're not going to be doing the more serious surgeries that make their big money. The supplies of things like masks and gowns, there are rules for how you maintain the inventory of those that have prevented them from having stockpiles. So all of this is exposing profound flaws in how we structure our healthcare.
Now, back in 2008, there was the TARP money. It was $750 billion or so, and then that metastasized and became many trillions of dollars. This 2020 repeat of the 2008 crisis has started off with a $6 trillion bailout. I'm sure that'll balloon to much bigger numbers in the months that follow. The vast majority goes to the same bankers, private equity, corporations that wreck the economy. Steve Mnuchin's been granted enormous powers over trillions to be dispensed to banks and corporations. Another daylight robbery in the works. But this is, again, it's a repeat of 2008, but just 10, 20 times bigger. And it doesn't seem like there's anything in place that would put any brakes on this at all, Matt.
No, there won't be. And I think the difference with this, as opposed to 2008, is that in 2008 there wasn't a predicate event that the public could look at and say this organically caused a financial crisis. I mean, if anybody bothered to actually look, they would find that the 2008 crash was caused by a lengthy period of gambling in the mortgage markets, particularly the subprime mortgage markets, and they would be able to draw a direct line between that and the people who were the companies that were most in crisis and ended up receiving most of the aid. In this case, I think it's going to be very, very hard to train public eyes on the financial disaster and see and have them be upset in the same way as they ultimately were after 2008, because people are going to say this is an organic, natural disaster that we just had to deal with one way or the other, and they're going to ignore the enormous profiteering that's going to go on because they're going to see it as a rational response to a real crisis.
Now, leading up the years up to this crisis, airlines This is one thing, though, that people are really starting to figure out, Matt, is that the airlines spend, and other companies, 96% of their cash flow on these stock buybacks. Boeing spent $100 billion on buybacks. Now they're getting bailed out. So there's a direct cause and effect here. The airlines spent all of their free cash flow goosing their own stock and essentially transferring that wealth to the executives. Now when they need the cash, they don't have it, and they go for a bailout. And this is being understood by the public now. They understand this, that there was a wholesale thievery going on in these industries, including particularly in the airline industry. Another meme that's gaining enormous traction is the central banks go brr or brr. You know, they're trying to inflate the market by printing money. So there's a meme of a pink Wojak psychotic guy printing money quickly to keep the market. So there is a connection. People do see the connection now between artificial money printing and the facade of a functioning market. So I think the public seems to be catching on, Matt. I mean, you're got your finger on the pulse over there at the Rolling Stone. Am I wrong?
What they'll eventually see is that there were serious flaws in the economy. Obviously, what you're talking about, we've had this artificially overheated stock market, this economy that's been based on all these rosy numbers that are continually reported coming out of Wall Street. But as you point out, it was really a party that the executives of these publicly traded companies were throwing for themselves, and they were just piling more and more cash into their own share prices in order to personally profit. So when this happens, it's not like we just said, hey, that's not a healthy way to structure the economy, and that's not the best way to equitably distribute resources and invest and grow and all these things. No, the response was just, let's just throw a bunch of money at the stock market so it keeps going in that direction, and then we can keep this party going. And you're right, there's absolutely a correlation in that sense, because that's exactly what happened in 2008. Similarly, with the money printing, of course, we had more or less exactly the same situation in 2008 with, their various quantitative easing programs. So yeah, it's the same. I just think the public, it's going to take them one extra step to get there, to get to the outrage, just because of the coronavirus thing, that people are going to say, well, hey, it's a real problem.
Let's turn to politics, because I know you've been writing a lot and tweeting a lot about this upcoming 2020 race, because it's got some fantastic cast of characters and some real drama developing here. On the Democratic side, we've got Joe Biden, who there seems to be some questions surrounding what's going on in that camp. If you look at Twitter, apparently the American voters, there's still a lot of support of the way Trump's handling the coronavirus pandemic. But what's your take here? It looks like the Democrats might be underestimating Trump again. But how do you see what's happening here?
It's such a repeat of 2016. I covered Trump's campaign in 2016, and right from the start, one of the things I noticed was there was a gap between how Trump was perceived by people like me in the media, who worked in New York, LA, and Washington, and how he was being perceived by people in the rest of the country, by the bulk of voters, and particularly by the bulk of conservative and independent voters. So Trump, the more he was exposed to people, the more people actually liked him. I mean, when he went out in the campaign trail, they loved going to his rallies. He got enormous amounts of enthusiasm. But the press and the political class continually registered this as some kind of error, like it wasn't real. They thought that there was eventually going to be some kind of correction. The more they wrote about him, the more they complained about him on television, and it didn't happen. The more Trump got out in front of voters, the better he did ultimately, and the more condemnation he got from people in New York, LA, and Washington, the more people seem to like him. And that's what we're seeing now, again, with this coronavirus thing and with this election cycle. There's been this assumption that as soon as we get somebody who's superficially not a lunatic, that person is automatically going to win this enormous amount of support. But no, again, even in this crisis, Trump's approval rating goes up. His approval rating during the impeachment hearings went up. During Russiagate, it went up. And it's the same miscalculation that the same people are making. It just boggles my mind that they think that there's going to be a different outcome this time.
Well, in 2016 and leading up to 2020, there seems to be the dead hand of Hillary Clinton in play, right? I mean, whatever happens is that, she denied Bernie 2016. The DNC, of which apparently she still has influence, has maneuvered Bernie out through a lot of dirty tricks. And now with Biden, it looks like a straw man to somehow maybe parachute Hillary in at the last minute to save the day. And is that the reason Trump gained so much popularity, is because people see through the machinations of Hillary Clinton?
Well, whether it's Hillary personally or just the party as backed by Hillary and all of the Clinton acolytes, yeah, it's those people. I don't know that there's actually a plan to replace Joe Biden with somebody like Hillary or Andrew Cuomo. That's the popular conspiracy theory lately. But certainly they think that their formula, that formula of politics is going to somehow prevail this time around. And they're just wrong. They don't understand how that there's a ceiling there for how much support that brand of politics can get with this electorate. And they also don't understand that there's an enormous level of anger and frustration and just outright dislike of that brand of politics out there. They're not sensitive to it. They think actually that they're liked much more than they are. And it's just frustrating to watch. The thing with Bernie Sanders, I think he's a flawed candidate. I love Bernie. I've known him forever, and I've written a lot about him over the years. He does have his flaws, but the reason he was interesting as a candidate is because he presented a different kind of politics, something that was substantively different from what they ran last time. And I think it would have had a better chance with independents and with other kinds of voters. But no, they want to go back and just run it back, and they think it's going to be different. I don't understand.
Right. Okay. Well, nice to speak with you again, Matt Taibbi. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, Max. Hang in there.
Will do. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Matt Taibbi, star, writer of the Rolling Stone. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.